The dawn light had barely pierced the eucalyptus canopy when the Silverstone gold ore mine roared to life. Heavy equipment rumbled down the dusty access road, haul trucks, excavators, and a specialized drilling rig, tracing a winding path toward the newly opened North Drift. At the portal, a lone wombat den nestled against the pale sandstone wall, its entrance camouflaged by scrub and leaf litter. To any passing eye, it was simply another burrow among dozens dotting the hillside. For veteran shift boss, Marco Santorin, it was day 47 of the pilot excavation, and productivity had been flawless until the first tremor. At 6:12 a.m., deep within the drift, a remote microphone array registered a sharp thump, followed by a telltale rustle of shifting earth above the roof supports. The acoustic signature matched no known seismic event. It was low frequency, slightly muffled, and consistent with a wombat's burrow collapse. Marco paused his lumbar support seat to replay the waveform. Strange, he muttered to geotechnician Priya Menon. That's a wombat burrow, not a rockfall. Priya peered at the spectrogram. Two distinct pulses. The first, a resonant thud as the burrow roof gave way. The second, a softer roar of collapsing soil, cascading into the den. She tapped her tablet. Exactly. Depth estimate puts it about 50 meters above our drift, near the southern bench. Inside the drift, driver-operator Darnell Duke Liu glanced at the noise-canceling headset's auxiliary monitor. Unusual animal tunnel event detected. The drill bit slowed automatically, toggling to safety mode. Boss, you hear something? He asked, voice echoing across steel ribs. Marco keyed the comms. All units, pause operations for roof fall check. The cavern went quiet, but for the hiss of ventilation and the distant drip of groundwater. In the gloom, ring lights on rigid frames flickered across the welded supports. Above ground, the Wombat, mid-sized, barrel-bodied, fur-dingled, and mottled brown, had bolted from its shattered den, emerging seconds before the collapse. It scuttled up the slope, whining in distress, then circled back, scratching at the loose soil, and ears lifted to catch returning echoes of its own collapse. Its frantic activity on the surface mirrored the telltale microseismic spikes recorded by the geophone network. Within minutes, Marco and Priya donned headlamps and PPE, ascending the access ladder to the bench above the drift. Shovelfuls of displaced earth lay strewn around the burrow entrance, charcoal black from decomposed leaf matter. The den's vaulted chamber had pancaked outward, soil and rock filling the lower half. Priya used a laser rangefinder to map the collapse, a 6-meter-wide depression, funneling toward the drift's roof. Our workers would have been directly beneath that, Marco said gravely. He noted the timber props just 20 meters in from the roof. If we hadn't paused on that wombat signal, we'd be looking for bodies right now. Priya uploaded the event to the mine's control room and triggered an automated safety protocol video. Burrow detection and roof stability alert. Back in the tunnel, miners stood at the drill rigs, wide-eyed but unhurt. Duke exhaled, shaking his head. Wombat saved our hides, boss. Moments later, a chorus of excited chatter crackled over the mine's intercom. Wombat burrow collapse. Area evacuated. Roof inspection underway. On the surface, the animal scurried to safety, its burrow sealed behind it, as if marking the end of a natural early warning system. As the geologists and engineers converged to shore up the unstable bench, Marco recorded his after-action notes. Animal moderated sentinel event. Wombat burrow collapse directs preventive evacuation. Roof fall averted. Recommend expanded burrow monitoring network. In the hissing dawn hush above Silverstone Mine, a wombat's subterranean refuge had become the mine's greatest ally. Its collapsed chamber a stark reminder that sometimes the most unlikely sentinels dwell in the quiet earth beneath our feet. And for the crew of North Drift, every shift thereafter began not only with a toolbox talk, but with an ear attuned to the faintest rumble of nature's own alarms. By mid-morning, Silverstone Mine's geology team had sealed off the affected section of North Drift and begun a methodical roof integrity survey. Rock bolts were tension-tested, resin capsules injected into hairline fractures, and laser scan LiDAR mapped every inch of the tunnel ceiling. Yet even as hydraulic jacks incrementally braced weakened spans, geotechnician Priya Menon's tablet pinged with a new alert. Burrow collapse, sector B2, 074512. Priya scanned the notification in the control room. Sector B2 lay nearly 200 meters down the drift, where a cluster of wombat dens had been logged during the mine's environmental assessment. These burrows formed a complex labyrinthine network of interconnected tunnels, woven through sandstone seams and overburdened soils like an underground web. "Marco," Priya called to shift boss Santrin, who was overseeing the bolt testing on the LiDAR console. "The burrow network, Sector B2, just collapsed too. That's 2 natural alarms this morning." Marco's brow furrowed. He keyed his comms. "All teams. Halt drilling and haulage in sectors B2 and B3. Evacuate to muster points Alpha and Bravo. We'll stage roof checks before we proceed." His voice carried the weight of authority. No one questioned a wombat-driven evacuation. In the drift, miners paused their jumbo drills and crawled from cabs of shuttle cars, their visors reflecting the harsh glare of cap lamps. Foreman Darnell Duke Liu checked his gas monitor. No hazardous readings. He gripped his comm mic. "All clear. Just a burrow collapse. We'll grab coffee in the staging bay." Outside, above the drift portal, geologist Annika Patel and environmental engineer Luis Ortega ascended to the bench where the first wombat den had collapsed. Priya joined them in a dust-coated SUV outfitted with seismic listening gear. They approached a shallow crater rimmed with fallen sticks and shredded leaf litter, the unmistakable remnants of a wombat refuge. Luis knelt at the crater's edge, trowel in hand. "Compare the soil texture here to undisturbed ground," he said, brushing aside fresh detritus. The exposed subsoil displayed a honeycomb of old burrow walls, now caved into a central void. This burrow ring extends at least 5 meters in diameter. The collapse we detected was the final roof failure. Annika swept the scene with a thermal camera. The lens revealed 2 residual heat signatures, likely the wombat itself and its young, safe in a secondary chamber deeper underground. "They're fine," Annika confirmed, "but the collapse pattern gives us a real-time subsidence map." Priya smiled. "Exactly, and that's our key takeaway. We're not just reacting, we're learning." Each wombat burrow collapse pinpoints zones of overburden weakness, helping us adjust our support design preemptively. She tapped her tablet and overlaid the new collapse coordinates onto the mine's 3D stability model. A network of red collapse nodes appeared, tracing a curved belt above the drift roof. Marisol Iodel, the mine's chief environmental liaison, emerged from a service lift. "Team, this is gold. If we integrate these burrow-driven alerts into our geotechnical software, we can forecast likely failure corridors before we even drill there." She held up her tablet showing a heat map of subsidence risk. The ahead-of-schedule collapse nodes aligned perfectly with zones of elevated horizontal stress predicted in last week's rock mass simulation. With a nod from Marco, Annika and Luis triggered a new protocol: Burrow Integrated Support Design. Within hours, engineering crews began installing pre-drilling 3D-printed polymer resin anchors along the identified belt, supplemented by steel mesh and shotcrete in anticipation of potential overbreak. Back in the control room, Priya configured an expanded network of miniature seismic sensors, each calibrated to detect the subtle thump and rustle signature of wombat burrow collapses. She programmed the system to push real-time SMS alerts to all shift leaders whenever a new collapse occurred, along with collapse cluster mapping that any site engineer could view on a mobile app. As evening fell, Marco reviewed the consolidated data. 3 collapse events in 14 hours had illuminated nearly 60 meters of previously uncharted overburden instability. His final note in the shift log read, "Wombat burrow monitoring has transitioned from novelty to necessity. Initiate full drift burrow mapping and integrate collapse alerts into all support design workflows." In the hushed glow of his office monitor, Marco looked at the red-spotted roof map and quipped to Marisol, "You know, these wombats are some of our best geotechnical consultants." Marisol laughed. "And they work for carrots." She held up a small bag of fresh produce. "Tomorrow, let's deliver an offer they can't refuse." As the mine lights dimmed and jackhammers gave way to generator hums, the Silverstone team departed for rest, confident that, thanks to a Wombat's subterranean sentinel role, the drift ahead lay measured, supported, and infinitely safer than the path behind. The pale glow of the control room monitors at Silverstone Mine marked another sleepless night for the geotechnical team. Lines of red burst nodes traced the drift's roof on a 3D stability model, each point representing a Wombat Burrow collapse detected hours, sometimes days, earlier. Shift boss Marco Santorin rubbed his eyes as Dr. Marisol Ayodel and geotechnician Priya Menon joined him at the central console. 4 new collapse events logged since 200, Priya reported, her fingertip dancing across the touchscreen. Nodes B5 and C1 cluster above the pilot face. And now Sector D3 has just popped, a Burrow undercut at bench level. On the live map, D3's icon blinked crimson. "We've got to shore that area before the next shift arrives." Marisol nodded, voice steady despite fatigue. "Deploy immediate support to D3. And Priya, overlay those nodes with our stress fracture heat maps." Within seconds, the control room hum shifted as 2 datasets converged. The red Burrow locations aligned almost perfectly with zones of predicted overburden stress exceeding 12 megapascal, areas previously deemed marginally safe. "Consensus model confirms," Marco said, "these Wombat collapses aren't random. They're pinpointing micro-failures in the roof strata." He keyed his comms. "All units, suspend all drills past chain link marker D2. Maintenance, mobilize resin bolt crews to bench level plus 8 meters. Safety line Bravo is active." In the drift, roaring diesel lights flickered to life as drilling rigs powered down. Miners in orange overalls set down their power tools and retreated to the illuminated safe alcoves every 20 meters, small side bays lined with reinforced mesh and emergency supplies. Bolt crews armed with segmented steel rods and 2-component grout canisters clambered onto hydraulic platforms, their cap lamps bobbing in the swirling dust. At bench D3, a slender geologist's sonde drilled a 20-millimeter pilot hole overhead. He wiped sweat from his brow, then watched in satisfaction as resin pumped into the void, expanding under pressure and solidifying within seconds. A polymer cast anchoring rock layers that wombats had long since tested. Beside him, a second crew wove high-tensile steel mesh between roof supports, tying the mesh to new resin bolts flush with the ceiling. Above the drift portal, environmental ecologist Luis Ortega and wildlife liaison Annika Patel consulted with local land stewards, indigenous custodians of the land whose ancestral knowledge had first cataloged wombat den distributions. Under a canvas gazebo, they overlaid traditional Burrow maps, hand-drawn in ochre and charcoal, onto the mine's digital GIS. "Our ancestors knew these hollows marked softer sandstone seams," explained Elder Kuriga, voice low but firm. "Wombats always dig where the earth is easiest to move, but also where it's least stable for heavy weight." Marisol listened, heart buoyed by the synergy of ancient wisdom and high-tech monitoring. "Your maps guided our initial Burrow census, and the sensors refined it," she said, adjusting her tablet view. "Together, we've mapped over 1,000 wombat hollows in a 2-kilometer radius, each telling us where to expect subsidence." That afternoon, Priya issued the first Burrow-Guided Roof Support Plan, BGRSP Revision 1.0. Sections of drift where wombat corridors lay concentrated, sectors A through E, received upgraded 4.5-meter resin bolts. Secondary benchworks installed flood-proof shotcrete linings and new acoustic dome sensors, sensitive to sub-20 Hz earth tremors, were deployed every 5 meters. A simple color-coded gauge accompanied each node: green for stable, amber for monitor-recommended bolt reinforcement, and red for immediate evacuation. The control room's main display now pulsed with purpose. Wombat Burrow nodes flickered in amber and red, each a pediatric heartbeat of Earth's own vulnerability. Under primatologist guidance, the team even began experimenting with predictive burrow drift, a model where the time between burrow collapse and overburden load spikes could forecast future subsidence along an extrapolated vector. Early trials on historical data yielded a 78% accuracy rate in predicting next-day collapse locations, an unprecedented leap in mine safety forecasting. As dusk gathered, Marco stepped into the drift's entrance. He flicked off his headlamp, allowing the mine's ambient lights to cast long shadows. The newly reinforced sections above him gleamed cold and solid, every mesh strand and resin anchor a testament to pocketed wombat holes now bridged by human ingenuity. Across the concrete sill, the natural world's subterranean sentinels had spoken, and the mine had translated their language into iron and polymer, safety and foresight. Back at the control room, Marisol drafted her nightly report. Chapter 3: Integration of Burrow collapse data into structural support workflows. She signed off with a simple reflection. We no longer simply tunnel through rock. We navigate by the whispers of the Earth's tiniest architects. Outside, the crescent moon rose over the eucalypts. Somewhere beneath, a wombat settled into its deepest chamber, oblivious to the layers of mesh and bolt above, its ancient warning rhythms having woven an unbreakable shield across Silverstone Mine's every drift and bench. Silverstone Mine's third shift had barely settled into its rhythm when the warning sounded. A low, hollow thump deep within Sector C4. In the cramped control room, Priya Menon's ears detected it before the seismographs did. The unmistakable acoustic signature of a wombat burrow collapsing. She froze mid-keystroke, replaying the data overlay. "Marco," she hissed into her headset, "we've got a C4 burrow collapse. Immediate evacuation." Shift boss Marco Santorin slapped the pause all button. An urgent klaxon swept through the drift, silencing jackhammers and haul truck engines in their tracks. In the gloom, miners signaled each other with helmet lights as they ducked toward the yellow-striped evacuation alcoves. But the mine had changed since the first collapses. The shift's geologists had already identified C4's overburden as perilous, a labyrinth of intersecting wombat tunnels stretching nearly 8 meters above the drift roof. They had shored much of it, yet coded nodes on Priya's monitor blinked bright red. Imminent failure. Deep within C4, a half-dozen miners rotated a tunnel-boring cutter toward a new face. The ceiling overhead creaked in protest. A dull moan rippled through the steel arches before a violent crack shattered the air. Tons of sandstone and soil rained down, sealing the drift at both ends and burying the awaiting crew beneath a choking cloud of dust. In the control room, gas sensors and ground-penetrating radar lit up in alarm. "Miner entrapment, Sector C4, Marco radioed. "Mobilize rescue teams and activate burrow collapse response." Within moments, 2 rescue squads, each equipped with rebreathers, hydraulic jacks, and borescope cameras, assembled at the drift entrances. Above ground, the renewed clamor reached Luis Ortega and indigenous Elder Curriga, who stood beside a row of newly installed acoustic dome sensors. Elder Curriga placed a weathered hand on the mesh cover of the C4 sensor. "They will drum again," he said quietly. In the eucalyptus rim, the soft rustle of grass foretold the arrival of the local wombat. Sure enough, from the hillside above the entombed drift, a lone wombat, its den freshly collapsed, emerged and thumped twice on the sandstone lip before retreating into shadow. A second later, another thump echoed farther downslope, then a third, each from distinct hollows mapped weeks before. Luis relayed the sequence to the control room. 3 thumps at irregular intervals, the classic distress code in wombat language. Priya triangulated the signals. C4 rescue coordinates. Bench level plus 8 meters, offset 12 meters east. Entrance under the collapsed debris. She uploaded the geo-references directly to the rescue team's handhelds. "That's your access point," she confirmed. Rescue team lead Jasmine Jazz Morales acknowledged with a curt nod. "Copy that. Proceeding to entry point Bravo." Armed with thermal imaging goggles and reinforced jackhammers, Jasmine's crew clawed at the sedimented rubble, guided by the Wombat-derived GPS. The resonance of their hydraulic tools mixed with Overburden's distant groans. Each meter they tunneled, the outside world awaited word of survivors. Meanwhile, in the control room, Marco watched a live borescope feed as the rescuers broke through the final layer of limestone. A narrow daylight slit appeared, revealing flickering helmet lights and dust-caked faces of the trapped crew, shaken but alive. The miners, muffled by the mammoth weight above, had heard the rescue team's muffled shouts and pounded on debris to guide the jackhammers. With synchronized precision, the rescue crew enlarged the opening and hauled each miner to safety. Tears mingled with sweat as dust-caked arms reached through the void. Elder Kuriga, standing on the surface, pressed his palm to the earth, murmuring thanks to the Burrow's collapse and its sentinel messenger. Back in the drift's entrance alcove, miners and rescue personnel embraced. The roar of comms replaced by relieved sobs and laughs. Marco exhaled, voice hoarse. Great work. All accounted for. Thanks to the Wombat alarm. As an after-action review convened, Dr. Iodell addressed the rescue teams via livestream. You saw how critical those Burrow signals were. From C4's collapse to the triangulated Wombat drum code, our blind spots became beacons. Today, nature guided us to save our own. Later, around a field-lit debrief table, rescue team lead Morales tapped her helmet lamp beam on a rough sketch of C4's collapse zone. We'll refine the Wombat Rescue Protocol, WRP version 1.2, to expedite future responses. But Marco, she added with a weary smile, it sure beats probing blind. Marco chuckled, eyes misting. I'll second that. From now on, every shift begins with a Burrow check, and an ear for the thumps that matter most. In the hush that followed, the mind pulsed with renewed respect for the quiet architects beneath the earth. Above, the nocturnal vigil began anew. Faint wombat thumps shimmered across the hillside. Each beat a solemn promise that even in darkness and under crushing weight, the smallest sentinels would sound the alarm. And in that promise, every heart in Silverstone Mine found its own lifeline. 2 weeks after the C4 rescue, Silverstone Mine's control room hummed with coordinated activity. But this time, it was planning, not panic. Lines of collapse node data scrolled across the main monitor, now annotated with rescue timestamps, burrow depths, and soil composition analyses. In the center, shift boss Marco Santorin presided over a burrow forecast workshop, joined by Dr. Marisol Iodele, geotechnician Priya Menon, and environmental liaison Luis Ortega. C4 taught us that burrow collapse isn't just an alarm, it's data, Marco began, tapping a collapse node on the live 3D model. Let's turn these events into a predictive tool that guides our support design before the next collapse. Priya pulled up the latest regression model. We've correlated collapse frequency with overburden thickness, tensile strength of the sandstone layers, and distance from major fault lines. By overlaying this with our Burrow network map, she switched to a detailed GIS view, we can forecast high-risk zones with a lead time of up to 3 days. Marisol nodded, adding, we'll call this the Wombat Risk Index, WRI. Any sector scoring above 0.7 on the WRI scale mandates preemptive reinforcement, resin bolt jackets, steel mesh, and, if necessary, auxiliary roof arches. She tapped a sector labeled E2. That's our pilot site for WRI Level 1 implementation. Luis chimed in, we also need to preserve the wombats themselves. Our sensors and surveying can't destroy their burrows. I propose installing non-invasive ground-penetrating radar drones to update burrow maps without trenching. He showed a prototype quadcopter with folded GPR arrays. It can fly at 2 meters altitude, scan 10 meters deep, and map voids with 10-centimeter resolution. Marco grinned. Perfect. Automated burrow senses twice daily. The WRI model refreshes via real-time feeds, and we adapt our support design accordingly. No more surprises. That afternoon in Sector E2, a team led by Foreman Darnell Duke Liu prepared to test the new WRI protocol. Armed with pre-drilled resin sleeves and mesh panels, they scaled hydraulic platforms to install 6-meter resin bolts along the predicted risk belt. Using the drone's GPR scan data, they avoided active burrow tunnels and targeted the load-bearing strata above. High above them, the GPR drone's synthetic aperture pulses carved subsurface imagery in real time. Rendered on a rugged tablet as a heat map of voids and rock densities, Duke adjusted each bolt's depth to miss burrow shafts by at least 1 meter, preserving the Wombat's subterranean highways. When the mesh panels snapped into place, the new Wombat-friendly support line gleamed under headlamps. Back in the control room, Priya watched the installation feed and updated the WRI dashboard. Sector E2's risk score plummeted from 0.82 to 0.45. A transition from immediate action required to monitor. Marisol annexed the result into the Burrow Integrative Design Manual, marking E2 as the world's first operational Wombat Risk Index deployment. That evening, under a blood-orange sunset, Marco and Luis visited the Wombat conservation team, led by Elder Kuriga. They presented the drone GPR maps and explained how the support design had protected both miners and wombats. Kuriga's weathered face broke into a rare grin. "You have learned the Earth's heartbeat," he said. "In return, we teach wombats to trust your presence." As the miners' chorus of jackhammers gave way to the gentle thump of dusk drumbeats, wombats emerging to patrol their still intact burrows, Marisol reflected on the transformation. What began as an emergency response to a single burrow collapse had matured into a robust framework of predictive safety, guided by the lowly wombat's humble tunnels. In the days that followed, the WRI protocol rolled out to sectors A, B, and D. Collapse nodes there steadily declined, confirming that foresight born of nature's warnings could truly reshape subterranean safety. And high above, the wombats continued their ceaseless digging, unconcerned architects of a system that valued every thump of their burrowed alarms. In Silverstone Mine, the line between human engineering and wildlife instinct had blurred into one enduring principle. Listen, and the earth will show you where to build, where to brace, and where to respect the silent sentinels beneath your feet. A month after the Wombat Risk Index, WRI pilot in Sector E2, Silverstone Mining Headquarters buzzed with activity as the executive boardroom streamed live video from every drift face. CEO Laura Benton presided over the Wombat Integration Summit, flanked by Chief Safety Officer Marco Santorin, Chief Geotechnical Engineer Dr. Marisol Ayodele, and a delegation of site managers from Silverstone's 5 global operations. On the central screen, a world map flickered with active WRI nodes across Australian opal fields, Canadian potash shafts, and South American copper tunnels, each colored by risk level. Laura tapped her laser pointer at the map. "Since adopting WRI," she announced, "our incident rate has plunged by 68%, and roof fall-related downtime has dropped 54%. Today, we commit to making Wombat-guided design our global standard." Applause filled the room. Marisol took the podium. "Our next step," she explained, "is institutionalizing WRI within our corporate engineering manuals and digital platforms. We've begun integrating the WRI algorithm into the mine planning software. So, when geologists place a new drift line, the system automatically flags wombat burrow proximity and overburdened stress intersections, generating a tailored support design before any excavation begins." On screen, Priya Menon demonstrated the updated interface, a 3D tunnel preview with dynamic WRI halos, glowing in amber or red. A built-in calculator suggested bolt lengths, mesh densities, and shotcrete volumes. Site engineers simply accept or refine the proposal, Priya noted. It cuts design time by 40% and ensures every plan respects the Earth's natural voids. Site manager Daniel Okoro, dialing in from Nigeria, had first-hand experience. At our Colton mine, we mapped over 300 wombat-like mole rat burrows within 2 weeks, he said. With WRI, our new drift designs avoided high-risk seams entirely. It's saved lives and millions in remediation costs. Laura pivoted to a policy slide. WRI compliance, from pilot to policy. She outlined a three-tiered rollout. Tier 1, immediate. All active drifts and new developments adopt WRI under gold standard safety protocols. Tier 2, 90-day. Refresher training for site engineers, geologists, and safety officers worldwide, led by certified WRI instructors. Tier 3, 180-day. WRI accreditation becomes a requirement for all contractor bids, with external audits verifying compliance. Chief Legal Counsel Priya Rao then addressed regulatory engagement. We're partnering with mining authorities to recognize WRI as an industry best practice. Draft legislation is in review that would incentivize, or even mandate, bioacoustic and burrow-based risk assessment for any new underground operation. An elder from the on-site Indigenous Council, wearing traditional ochre attire, rose to speak. Our ancestors have long known where wombats dig. Those hollows mark the shifting bones of the land. To see this wisdom honored at the highest level fills our hearts. We offer continued guidance to ensure that WRI respects both subterranean wildlife and sacred sites. As evening fell, teams broke into working groups. Software developers refining the WRI plugin, training coordinators drafting e-learning modules, environmental officers discussing conservation offsets for protected wombat habitats. Overhead monitors displayed real-time WRI dashboards from each Silverstone site, color bars sliding towards stability as new supports went live. That night, back at Silverstone's flagship site, shift boss Marco Santorin led a ceremonial Burrow blessing. Under a bonfire's glow on the mine's reclaimed surface, he and Marisol, flanked by local rangers, offered fresh grasses and water at several marked wombat den clusters, symbols of respect and partnership. "May your burrows guide our hands," Marco intoned, echoing the mine's new ethos. Later, as the camp lights dimmed, Marisol sat by the original Casa sensor hut, reviewing messages from overseas, thank you notes from mine managers in Chile, requests for WRI workshops in Kazakhstan, and an invitation from the International Mining Safety Council to speak at their annual Congress. In the gentle night's air, the earth lay quiet, its wombat architects resting in chambers, now safeguarded by a global movement. Above them, the Silverstone mine, once a locus of subsurface risk, had become a beacon of innovation, where the humble Burrow taught humanity to build more thoughtfully, more respectfully, and more safely than ever before. And somewhere beneath the sandstone, wombats stirred, their tunnels secure, their voices woven into the very fabric of mining's future, and into the living legacy of Silverstone's Sentinel network. A year after the Wombat Integration Summit, Silverstone Mine's operations were transformed. The cavernous tunnels of North Drift now featured bright yellow WRI alerts every 50 meters, digital displays that pulsed green, amber, or red according to real-time Wombat Risk Index scores. In the control room, geologists, engineers, and indigenous guardians worked side by side, their stations ringed with live feeds from seismic geophones, CASA animal monitors, and GPR-drone overlays. Shift boss Marco Santorin surveyed the command center's panoramic screens as dawn's pale light filtered through skylights. To his right, Chief Geotechnical Engineer Dr. Marisol Ayodel reviewed the global WRI dashboard, decades of Burrow collapse events parsed into predictive models for every Silverstone site worldwide. On her left, environmental liaison Luis Ortega conferred with representatives from local wildlife trusts on plans to expand wombat habitat corridors above the mine, a commitment born of respect and reciprocity. Today, they would celebrate not only another year of zero roof fall injuries, but the maturation of a safety culture that honored the smallest creatures beneath the earth. In the subterranean auditorium carved from an abandoned drift, hundreds of mine staff and visitors gathered beneath suspended utility lights and banners depicting wombats intertwined with resin bolts. Elder Kuriga, resplendent in ochre robes, stood at the lectern, ready to share ancestral blessing. Marco opened the ceremony. When the first wombat burrow collapsed above North Drift, he said, voice resonant in the cathedral quiet tunnel, we thought it an anomaly, a lucky break. But these humble engineers of the earth have taught us far more. Their burrows map the fractures in our world. Their collapses save our lives. Today, we honor the wombat not as pest or bystander, but as partner and guide. A ripple of applause echoed off concrete walls. Marisol stepped forward, holding a sleek bronze clock engraved with a stylized burrow pattern, and the words, "To the architects below, our eternal gratitude." This clock will hang in the heart of every new Silverstone project, she declared. A reminder that time underground begins with listening. Elder Kuriga raised his hands in blessing, chanting an ancient invocation. May the wombat's path be safe. May the miner's work be wise. May earth and steel dwell in harmony. He cast handfuls of native seeds into the air above them, eucalyptus, native grasses, and burrow-stabilizing shrubs, symbols of growth and renewal. As seeds drifted to the drift floor, the crowd dispersed to interactive exhibits, a hollow wall tracing burrow networks in virtual 3D, a robotics lab where students programmed drone swarms to map subsurface voids, and a habitat pavilion showcasing the expanded wombat corridors, now ringed by wildlife cameras and educational signage. Families of miners' children marveled at life-size wombat sculptures, their pouches acting as resin bolt receptacles for donated safety samples. Outside, under a slate sky, Silverstone's landscape hummed with new purpose, the reclaimed topsoil hummocked by seedings of native flora, and along the drift portal's ridge, a line of rehabilitated wombat burrow banks offered ready refuge. Beyond them, the eucalyptus forest stretched, alive with dawn's chorus and safety's promise. As Marco and Marisol walked the ridge, the first burrow collapse alert chimed softly in their pockets, a remote test signal from a newly installed node at a nearby exploration site. They paused, eyes to the horizon, and smiled. Always listening, Marisol whispered. Marco nodded, always honoring. And in the cool morning air, beneath the silent arches of reinforced rock, the world's tiniest architects remained at work, digging and moving, warning and guiding, woven forever into the living fabric of Silverstone Mine and the broader tapestry of human endeavor. In every echo of collapse and every beat of the mine's resounding safety alarms, their legacy endured, a testament to the power of humility, of partnership, and of the Earth's most unassuming sentinels.